Hello, good evening everybody, and welcome to TNS Radio. The time is now just past 9 o'clock. It is 1st of the 4th, 2011 AD, so I'm told. And this is a special show tonight, folks. Anybody who has difficulty hearing from the main player on tnsradio.ning.com or tnsradio.com, just be sure to check the player below the chat box. If you have a bad internet connection, it will be easier to listen to. So, without further ado, tonight I want to let you know our guest tonight. We have Tom Kennedy is our guest tonight. Now, Tom is the man that we heard earlier on the radio today, folks, that I basically tipped off the Sovereign Siren in relation to. And we also have Billy Hines on the line with us as well. And we have Mally, and I think Daniel Green is there with us as well. So, hi guys, how are you doing?
Not so bad.
Can you hear me okay? Yep.
I can hear you.
How are you doing, Tom? I just want to make sure your levels are okay. So, Tom, in your own words, please, if you don't mind, can you give us a notion as to how come the situation came about to begin with?
I'm Tom Kennedy. I bought a farm from my brother Bashy in 1972. My brother Bashy was a schizophrenic for 30 years, and he couldn't read or write, and he used to count on his fingers. And I paid £12,000 in 1972 for that farm. And I was also his guardian. So as I ran the farm and everything, and we seen the complaint he had. We never spoke to the public. Back in them days, you didn't talk about schizophrenia because the bad name it had. And as time went on, I paid the money to the family solicitors, and I paid by cheque. And with my brothers, I was aware of it. They never transferred the land from my brother to me, and I had no proof that I ever owned the farm because I couldn't find the receipts for the land. And when my brother died in 2001, on the 20th of January, and they tried to say that land was part of his will. His will stated that leave all the assets, but I didn't identify it. And the land was sold, but it wasn't transferred. On the receipts, 3 houses as a deposit, and the balance of purchase money was fine. When I brought them into court, the solicitors then brought in the contract to sale admitting that I paid my brother. And they admitted I paid my brother, but they had a page attached to it saying my brother owned 2 farms. That the farm belonged to my mother as well, and that I bought that farm because the long folio was on the document. And it was proved in the High Court that my brother never owned 2 farms. He only owned the farm I bought, and that my mother owned the other farm, and the legal documents from land registry proved that my mother gave me that farm, and they were sealed and delivered by land registry and the rest of the commissioners. So as that was proved in the High Court that he only owned 1 farm. So the farm, this is the farm, just tried to say I was put off it today. And I had proof of payment, and I also was in possession of the farm. My brother was alive for over 25 years, but when he died, all this happened. And this is a cover by the solicitors to say that, and they had no proof. If I paid that the solicitors £12,000, I must get something from their money. They haven't gone into court saying that I bought another farm. That has been proved in the court to be untrue, and then the Land Registration Authority has given that in evidence. So I have been kicked off the land by the courts by injunctions. Judge McKetney was to hear the cases, and I was out on bail, and he was to hear it 2.5 years ago. And when he wouldn't hear it, we brought in a motion to get another judge to hear it. And Judge McKechnie wouldn't do that. And when Judge McKechnie was coming out of the case, Judge McKechnie passed comments that they didn't do anything wrong, and we have witnesses and evidence that he was biased. And when I told him that, he made an order preventing me from going back on the land, even though we objected to him hearing any other cases the way he had treated us. And we made that objection to him, and he still says he heard these and gave judgments against me to still prevent me from going on my land. As a sovereign citizen, I have gone onto my land, protecting my property. Now, I was on bail for 2.5 years up to last Tuesday week, and that was lifted last Tuesday week, and that was I went back on my land this week, and I put up no trespass notices and no trespass notices. For private property, for private use only, and I have put them all over the place. And I was on my property this morning. The Gardaí forced their way onto my property, or went onto my property, and I pointed to the notices no trespass, and I didn't communicate with them. And they eventually came back in force, and I think there was 4 guards in it. And I drove down my driveway and went onto it, and the car got stuck. And they broke the 2 passenger windows because I wouldn't open the doors. And as I told them, they were trespassing on my property, and they completely ignored me. And they arrested me, brought me into the Garda station in Thurles, held me there till 3:30 or that, and brought me to Limerick Court. And they brought me to Limerick Court on the grounds that I was trespassing, and they says they had a High Court order to stop me trespassing, and they told me that it was a criminal charge. They didn't tell me who the charge was against. And I objected, and I informed the court that I was a sovereign citizen and I was protected by the sheriff in the county. And it's adjourned until next Friday. I was let out on bail on £500 this evening after 5 o'clock. Anybody that wants to ask me any questions on it, or I'm willing to give any answers they require. But I was on my own property, and the guards came in on it, and they decide who's the owner of it. It's still even in the courts.
Well, sorry, Tom, Vincent here. Yeah, there are some questions going up in the chat box. I think you've already answered some of them. But in relation to proving legal ownership, you have basically you have a bill of sale, and you're saying that there was another...
A proof of payment.
A proof of
which
payment.
Is the most important thing if you buy a property.
Oh, sure, that's it. Yeah, absolutely.
You pay for it. And these family solicitors who done our business are trying to say that I bought my mother's property. My brother swore an affidavit saying that didn't happen. And the courts wouldn't take it. And, well, I paid my mother for a fight on the other property, and it was transferred through other solicitors and other firms. And it was signed over by this firm of solicitors that my mother was the owner of it at all times. There was land searches done by that firm of solicitors to say my mother was the owner of the other property, and by the building society solicitors. My mother was the owner of that property all the time, so I couldn't have bought in that property, and that has been conceded in that, agreed in the High Court, that my mother owned that, and no, I couldn't buy that. And if I couldn't buy that property, I could only buy the only property he owned. It was proved he didn't own two, and that was their defence, that he owned two properties. And that was proved in the court. He didn't own two, he only owned one. And it's also accepted in the courts that I paid him, because it was paid through solicitors, and we have documents, proof of payment.
Okay, and there are some questions going on the screen. Again, some of the guys don't really fully understand what's going on, so I appreciate that. And, guys, I appreciate Tom's sound is not fantastic. Tom, your phone line is not great, so the guys are having some trouble, difficulty hearing you. But, guys, just to let you know, this is being recorded this end anyway, and usually the recording is fine. So if I have to repeat the show afterwards, don't worry about it. If you've missed something, I'll repeat it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just letting the listeners know. So, okay, so you can prove ownership through bill of sale, if you will. What about in relation to title deeds? Were any of this was all put into the hands of a solicitor who should have basically done
These
the
were
work?
our family solicitors.
So they should have done the work on the title deeds, Tom. Is that correct?
Our family solicitors in all our properties, they didn't transfer any of our properties till 20 years later.
Right.
Some of the properties my mother gave me back in 1968-69 weren't done till 1988. And the family solicitors carried on in that sense. My brother has a pub, and I don't think it's yet put in his name 50 years later.
Right. So in other words, it's not uncommon apparently. Sorry, Billy, can you just mute until you're ready to come in, if you don't mind? You keep bumping off your microphone. Cheers. Mm-hmm. Thanks. Apparently this wasn't an uncommon thing that happened down the country, folks, whereby solicitors, because they were so well respected and trusted, I suppose, for donkey's years in Ireland, it's really 20, 30 years later, as people die, suddenly these issues come up because land title deeds and whatnot weren't fully transferred over or whatever. Would that be the case, Tom?
It would. When my mother died, she had a pub license in her name, and the solicitors, whatever way they messed it up, I think my brother was fined for having no license because they didn't attend to it properly.
Okay.
He was fined because the license wasn't properly transferred from my mother to me other brother Peter, and we had a lot of a family. This is what was done at that time, and when the solicitor that was doing our business for all our lives, when he retired, I asked him about had he everything in order before I paid him, and he told me he had, and he told me about this brother of mine, Batty, who was the schizophrenic. He told me he had a will made, and that I was the executor of the will. And when he died in 2001, I rang the solicitor because after all my life I was going to look after his burial, and I rang the solicitor, had he any wishes or anything, and he told me that he wouldn't have it, that he's retired, but to ring the solicitor in the office, that it was on a Sunday, and the solicitor says he'd go up and check. And the solicitor went up and looked in and to the will and told me there was no special wishes or anything in it. But he never told me I wasn't the executor of the will. There was a second will made, or he said anyhow, and it was dated 19. He never told me I wasn't the executor, and I continued burying him. And both the retired solicitor and an outsider were executor of my brother's will, and it's highly unusual not to have a blood relative executor of a will. And then things like this happened. We also, my brother, 10 weeks before he died, he told us, like, if you have a brother of schizophrenic and he wasn't capable of managing his affairs, which was certified by his psychiatrist and a doctor, said he changed his will, and he died 10 weeks later, and the will was dated 4 years previous. And we looked to have that will carbon dated, and we were prevented by the courts. And we knew nothing about law or anything else, and we didn't know anything about folios or this, and we had to find out we're 10 years at it now, and they're stopping us from getting justice in the courts. That they have injunctions on me, and as I said, the last one expired. I was let out of prison in 2007, and the judge gave me a judicial review, and it was to be heard the following week, and it just played around, and it went back to a judge kept me by a president of the High Court. I refused to hear it, and he played with it kept me off my land for 2.5 years. And that was lifted a fortnight ago. And the same Judge McKechnie was the judge who I told him straight to his face he was biased. And before he went off, he heard the other cases I was objecting to him to hear. And I don't accept that as fair hearing.
And Tom, can I just interrupt you for a second, if you don't mind? I just want you to know, some of the guys in the chat box are here, and they're saying, some of the listeners are saying things like, make sure that Tom doesn't say anything to prejudice or jeopardize any action he may have to take in the future. So I'm sure you're well aware of precisely what you can and can't say from your own perspective.
Well, I'm very limited. I'm just an ordinary person, but I'm a firm believer. I think if you say anything that is the truth, they can't stop you from going public with the truth. I have been, one judge has denied me freedom of speech I have been denied freedom of speech now for about 3 years, and I only got it back in a limited basis last week. And to me, that is not acceptable, that they can put a lid on me and on this case when the public should hear and know what's happening. Our family, I have been jailed several times, and they have tried to contempt the court. Contempt the court is they try and bring in a rule or get you to say or commit yourself that you stay off your own property. And if you say that or give that commitment, you're conceding ownership of it, and that is an unjust judge-made rule which shouldn't be adhered to. Any person that has property, and if they want to take it, that's the first thing they do. You come up with this, give a commitment to stay off your own property. And we gave a commitment to stay off our own property in the 6th of December 2005 to Judge Buttermore from that date to the 17th of January, because there was a case before Judge Gilligan in the High Court. And when we gave that commitment, the judgment wasn't wrote for a month or two later, and the judgment said it forgot to say the 17th, deliberately didn't say the 17th of January, which meant it was forever, and we never gave that commitment. And that's how the courts operate, and I also believe these judgments are, from my experience, it's the barrister, if in a normal case where you have two solicitors and two barristers or two solicitors, they agree a judgment. And if you're a lay litigant, the one person is writing his own judgment, and this is how the judgments are all against us. If the barrister or solicitor for the other side has the right of it, that's how they operate.
Again,
anyone can check out that, and we have proof of it.
So are you saying basically tonight, Tom? I mean, again, I just remind you, just so you don't bring any.
Yeah, but I'm saying what happened in my case, and I have proof of it. Right. That I and my brother and my son, we gave a commitment to stay off that land to the 17th, which was about 6 weeks, and there was a reason for it. There was a judge in the High Court going to confirm his ruling, and we weren't sure of it until he confirmed it on the 19th of December. And if we knew the result of that, we'd never have given that. But seeing that there was a doubt, we were playing safe, and it didn't matter in winter. But they went into court 100 times after that saying the commitment we gave. That commitment, and the judge was aware of it on the day, And that day, what happened on the 6th of December in court, it was before Judge Buttermore, she called the guards and had us brought to Kilkenny prison, or Kilkenny guard jail. We were jailed by the Gardaí. We asked Judge Buttermore why we were being jailed. We were given no explanation. We asked Register, she couldn't tell us. And the Gardaí who arrested us couldn't tell us. And we were left there, and people supporting us in the court couldn't find out, and they were gone home. And when everybody was gone home, they decided to bring us back to the court where there was nobody to witness what was happening.
And what happened in that court that night?
What happened in that night, Judge Buttermore asked us to give a commitment to stay off the land to the 17th of January, and we gave that commitment because we weren't on the land at that point due to the judgment that had been given on the 19th of December.
And Tom, that sounds like a very unusual thing to have a court. What time at night are we talking roughly for that late
We're
night?
talking about 7 o'clock in the evening.
Okay.
And this is what's happening in a lot of these courts. If you follow lay litigants around the place, they're always in courts, in lists or in back rooms that they can't be found, or that press or media can't find them. If you follow they adjourn it and they bring it to someone where you can have no witnesses of what's happening. And that's what's happening in our courts. If you followed our case over the years, we have the Judge McKetney's is the top floor around the corner. Very few would be able to, if the press or anybody else wouldn't find you. And you could be up in a lift. On the first occasion with Judge McKetney, he told the people in the court there was no need to come back, that he was only giving us a date. And when I went back, I had only one person there, and we went up in a lift up to a floor that we couldn't be found. There wasn't even a notice on the door, and we went in, and he tried to open the case. And the sad thing about this in courts, if you contract with them, they'll run it. If you don't know, if you don't object, and most lay litigants wouldn't know. And he told me what he was to hear the case that was before the last judge, but he told me he wasn't. He was hearing an ownership case. And I objected because the evidence in the judicial review had a bearing on the whole lot. And he told me he wasn't hearing it and this and that. And we brought in a motion before him to nominate another judge to hear it. And he wouldn't hear our motion and didn't hear it. And it was left there for 2.5 years, and I was on bail for 2.5 years, and I was denied me freedom of speech for 2.5 years because of Judge McKetney. And when he finished hearing the case, we were supposed to be getting, the case was over. The last day of it was the 22nd of December 2009. And we were to get the judgment in February, following February. And we didn't get that judgment till later in the year, and I think it was dated the 11th of June. And we were just waiting for this judgment. And when he read out the judgment, he says that the solicitors did not withhold documents, they didn't commit fraud. And we have written proof that the solicitors committed fraud, because in discovery of documents, they withheld the documents. They said they didn't, and our solicitor had looked for them. And the documents were eventually brought in when we found our receipts, and not till then. And when they were brought in, they were even taken off the court that evening. It was another Judge Buttermore's court. I brought in my receipts when I found them, and I left them down, and I didn't know any better, which was foolish. And they came back to follow and turn. I left down, and I said, that was the first time I said I owned it. I couldn't say I owned it till I found the receipts. You can't say you owned it and you'd have a double bad name if you couldn't find the receipts. So when I found the receipts, I went in and told the judge I owned it, and there's a proof of payment. And they came on a month later, and they had this contract of sale. I wasn't given a copy of it beforehand to study, and I was selectively set up by the barrister, Mr. Pat Tracy, and he he didn't give me a copy of it beforehand. He put me into the witness box and he asked me to read this piece of it, and like a fool I read it, and I didn't get that. And if I had the whole document, that document stated my mother was transferred out of that number to another folio in 1968, and the folio that he was reading out didn't exist in 1972.
Didn't exist.
And this is what's going on in the courts. And I told Judge Buttermore that day, he asked me to read another thing that was on a loose page at the back. Vendor Bartholomew Kennedy, folio 24284. Bartholomew Kennedy wasn't the owner of folio 24284. There was a mistake. My mother's, all was wrong in the whole case was my mother's folio was put in instead of his folio. And if his folio was put in, there'd be no case. And it has been proved that my mother owned the other folio, and that it went into a different number. But in the folio that was called out was even closed 4 years before this. Couldn't be used one way or the other. And my mother was the owner of the land in that folio up to 1993, and that has been confirmed by land registry in the courts for Judge McKechnie. Now, I'd hate to confuse everyone on it.
No, you're fine, Tom. Can I just ask you here?
There's one thing I forgot to. My brother gave me possession of the property, and I have been in possession of it for over 25 years. And I was looking after my brother as well. And possession and payment are the important things.
Well, first of all, I'd just like to say, what a story. Second thing I'd just like to say is, I know you've mentioned a couple of names there. I know you think you might have been done bad by this so-called system.
But anything I said, and anybody I mentioned,
I'm not saying
the truth, and I'm saying the people that done it. It's no good in letting these people away that nobody will know. And as I say, if a solicitor, if you have a brother is schizophrenic, and it's sad to have to look after him all your life and see him making a will, and to have outsiders, all the family he had, executors as a will. A new High Court judge, he was a barrister, he asked me why was that, and to explain that I didn't know it because he gave me the information. I'm not thinking it up myself. It's mind-boggling to think that when you go to bury one of your own, that outsiders could be doing it. It's a very personal thing. Like I buried my brother, and I didn't look left or right, but I was never thought I wasn't the executor. By right, the solicitor who made that will should have been getting on to the executor, and I'm sure there have been some dispute if they tried to bury him.
Yeah, no, the point I was just trying to make to you, Tom, is that, if anybody is going to name names here, we just like to make sure that everybody knows I'd rather you didn't do it if the man is not here to kind of talk for himself, and we say this about everybody,
The family solicitors, you can call them the family solicitors, or the judges. I don't know how you carry on without naming them, because to me, I have met some fair judges, and I'm not saying all solicitors are wrong, and I'd hate to say that. There's a lot of decent people in the world. The same thing with judges. But I'm only saying, what happened to us?
Oh, I understand you're telling your story, that's fine. I'm just like...
And another point was, I was got off my property at the start by Judge Buttermore, giving an injunction to keep me off my property, and that was got by misleading the judge. They says I had a lease, and it was proved before a Supreme Court judge, Hugh Gagan, and he says there was no lease. And he went into it in detail, and he also said that the case he was hearing was a trespass case, and it wasn't ownership. And he was a fine, upright judge, and I have to say that I'm not here to be knocking people, or I'm only here to be honest and fair to what happened. And Judge Buttermore, I'm sure she wouldn't have given the judgment she gave if the truth was before the court. And the withholding of documents was the biggest. If the documents were before the court, Judge Buttermore couldn't have made the decision she made. But the documents were withheld from the court. And that is a serious offence to withhold documents from a court or a register. And they were looked for under discovery by a solicitor, John Costello, and their affidavit said they had all the documents given. And when I found my receipts, it turned out that they hadn't, and they started producing them. They were admitting to fraud when they brought them in. That's all I'm saying. And it was even worse than that. When they brought them in, they weren't lodged in the court in the proper manner. I wasn't given, if you went to court, you're entitled to your own copy of the documents and you're entitled to time to study them beforehand. I was given none of them. And when the case was over, I told the judge I had documents to prove them wrong, and she went off the bench and she wouldn't listen to me. That's Judge Buttermore. And I went to the solicitor for a copy of the documents, and I was told I wouldn't get them. I went back in the following morning to Judge Buttermore, and I looked for a copy of the documents that I should have got them yesterday. And she had to come in and get up on the bench, and they had to bring in the barrister, and I had to look for them, and I was told to go back to the solicitor and get them the following day. And to me, that is wrong. That I should have having them, and why they given them to me, they were admitting that they had these documents all the time, and they were able to produce them the minute I found my receipts. They were withheld from the court, and I could never claim I owned this farm if I didn't find my receipts, because I had no proof of ownership. And the contract, they were holding it, and they produced it when they got into trouble, and that was then.
Well, I mean, it's a harrowing tale you tell, Tom, to be honest. And again, I mean, I understand you're you've been going through this for years and years, and I know.
My family we have looked after our brother for 30 years, and for this to happen, and with what happened to his will, and what happened, the whole thing, I wouldn't wish it on any family, and I'd like to give people who would be making wills to get a copy of them and give them to others, and anyone that has wills made in funny circumstances like that, say nothing to the solicitors that made them, only go to another solicitor and make a new will, and the last one will count. But to have wills made the way my brother's will was made, it was also accepted in court. The retired solicitor admitted in court that he made a will for my brother. He told me about it, but he admitted it under oath in court. And he also admitted in court that my mother gave me all her property, and he was the man that done the transactions. So we have, they're written in Judge Buttermore's judgment. They're there in black and white, what I'm saying. And I can give anybody that's in doubt or wants to examine any of the documents, I will make them available. I have a room full of documents, and the name of the game is confusion with so much documents that you can't concentrate. But that judgment by Judge Buttermore, and as I say, the one thing in fairness to her, if also they probated my brother's will, and Judge Buttermore gave him permission to, and I appealed it. But if the documents that were withheld from the court, they couldn't probate it. The first thing they'd have to do is prove what my brother owned before they could probate anything. And they didn't prove that, because they were withheld from the courts. And when I appealed it to the High Court Judge Hardyman, heard it, and I collapsed in court. And when I collapsed in court, and I had a doctor cert, I'm a diabetic for a number of years, and when I collapsed in court, The barrister for the other side says to the judge, he has admitted this, that I faked the collapse in court. And Judge Hardyman believed him and heard the case in the absence. And that's how our courts are ran. I had a doctor's cert. I was brought to the hospital that day. And it wasn't, I was advised to send the doctor's cert, which is the procedure, and I did, and it couldn't be held over for 2 or 3 days. They heard it in the absence, and he allowed them to probate it. And he was probated without having the withheld documents. You couldn't probate it if the withheld documents were before the court, because they'd have to decide what he owned before you could probate it. And also when they probated it, there was a number of livestock in my brother's name, and they probated it without probating the livestock. So that's the probate they have.
I'll be honest with you, Tom. I'm sitting here with my gob open because I'm absolutely shocked by if a fraction of what you've told me so far had happened to somebody I knew,
and all I'm saying is, we have gone through 10 years of hell. They have jailed my brother, my son, myself, and they have done it. Judge Buttermore done it cunningly. It came up before Judge Dial the first time we were being jailed, and I asked Judge Dial to hear my motion, which was to throw out the injunction on the grounds the injunction she granted, there was a condition on it that the land couldn't be ploughed. And there was an undertaking given by the barrister that wouldn't happen. And when we were jailed, the land was ploughed, and we had a motion in to have the injunction done away with, because if the land was ploughed, it shouldn't stand. And Judge Dial wouldn't hear that, and the barrister objected to anyone hearing it but Judge Buttermore. And we went back before Judge Buttermore a week later, and my brother or my son didn't have to be involved. You don't see it. And if my brother, if we did see a copy of that order, all my brother and my son had to do was walk back into the court and say, Judge, I purge my contempt. But I believe it was kept from us especially so that if we all stayed in prison for a week, we'd get tired of the three of us and walk back out. But at the end of the week, and then another thing is, if you know your way around, the governor of the prison can be asked to produce the order so you can see what your sentence are, but most prisoners don't know that. And we didn't know it, and they stayed in prison till we went back 1 week later before Judge Buttermore. And we had it worked out, they were purging their contempt, and I was staying. And I stayed in for 10 months, and every time I went to give Judge Buttermore the proof that my mother owned the other land, she was avoiding to take it. They didn't want to know. And it's a matter of, if you don't know your way around and you don't serve the right documents, you're there forever. And eventually in October, I read out a thing in Nina Court, and she thought I was handing up that, and I had her up the 2 orders that proved her wrong. That my mother owned her land, and my brother couldn't have owned it. But that's how you get them into the court. They try and prevent you from getting to the court. They try and withhold documents in the court that before Judge Dial, the register in the court. I told Judge Dial I had a motion there, and Judge Dial told me I hadn't. And when it was searched and found, the register was holding it. And that's what's happening in our courts. And this is, most people wouldn't, it took us, how many more things happened to us before we learned that much.
And can I ask you, Tom, straight up, what were you expecting justice at the beginning of all this? Did you think, it's okay, I'll just find that receipt and everything will be okay and there'll be no problems?
I believe that the family solicitors who've done all our business for 30 years or that number of years should hand us out our family documents. I left the solicitor in 1999 and I asked him for my documents. And that solicitor looked in and he says, I had no documents belong to you. You had them all. You gave me a few bits of irrelevant documents.
No. Yeah, I know, but what I'm asking you...
wasn't in a,
Sorry, Tom.
nothing else.
What I'm asking you, though, is...
He told me I had them all. And
right.
I had nothing. No members of our family had none of the documents. And it's like any professionals. If they have all your documents, you can never prove or get justice because they're not going to release them to do themselves.
I know, but the question I'm asking you, though, Tom, is at the beginning of all this, before any of this, the bad stuff in your eyes happened, did you actually think it would be a simple matter of going into a courtroom, showing a document, and everybody would say, that's okay, fine, and it would be sorted? Did you actually have that belief, is what I'm asking? At one stage, were you expecting justice?
I had a nervousness with what was happening when I wasn't getting documents off my solicitor. I had a belief that I couldn't prove. I'd have to walk away from this property if I can't find the receipts. I subpoenaed the retired solicitor in because they weren't being given. And when I subpoenaed the retired solicitor into the court, he gave us, we knew nothing about legal documents, but he gave us some of the documents that we knew about and we worked on it. He told us all about that my mother I got my mother's property, my brother got my father's property, and my other brother actually got my uncle's property. They were in his, but he didn't answer. The one question I wanted him to answer, he didn't answer it. What did I give him £12,000 for? And this was this land, and he didn't answer that question. He was asked it twice, and he didn't answer it. He just sung dumb. And I couldn't challenge it any further because I had no proof. So when I went home, I get 6 weeks turning up my house, and with the help of God, I found the cheque for the deposits of 3,000, and I also found a receipt for the 9,000. And when I had them, the next time I went into court, I produced them. And I could never have looking for ownership or getting ownership unless I found them, because they were withholding the contract to sale deliberately from me. But when I found them, they were able to bring in the contract to sale the following month, and they never gave it under discovery, and it was looked for under discovery. And as I was the customer, they should have given me that copies of these documents. They should be on my file. They weren't on my file. So where do you go from there? And also, the solicitor involved, he told another solicitor that I was implying that I owed him a substantial amount of money. And I sent him faxes for the bill on the numerous occasions, plus ringing him, and I couldn't get the bill out of him. And when I decided to transfer property to my son, another solicitor found out that he had my mother's certificate of transfer. This was the major document. And he told me he wouldn't release it to me till I paid the bill. And I said, I'm tired of looking for the bill. I said, I'll be over in the morning, fax over the bill. And I'll have the money. I don't owe anything on, never did. And he faxed me over the bill. And I faxed him back a receipt where I paid it 10 years earlier. I had a receipt proving I paid that. And the top item in that bill was the transferring of my mother's property from her to me, and he said my brother sold it to me.
I mean, I'm sorry but this I know it sounds ludicrous. I just don't think people expect that this...
If anybody wants to see any of this, yeah, I can show them to them in writing.
Yeah, well, I'll say this to you too, Tom. Don't be panicked about time on the radio here tonight. You know, there's no rush. We're here with you, and we'll let you talk. There's no problem there.
But I'm just, for the listeners outside, I can believe these things, they're so off the wall. I can understand that they believe that I'm either crazy, which they try to make out I am. Judge Mortimer, when I was in prison, tried to say I had to be psychiatrically examined. And she tried that game with me, and I refused to have it done. Because if I did, and if they sent in their own psychiatrist, they could come up with anything, and I wasn't leaving myself exposed to that. And that wasn't a nice thing for a judge to decide. These are all the things they try on you, And if they got somebody that they can get you to do it, and when I'm dealing with them people, nothing is impossible.
And I wanted to bring Billy in a little bit as well. Billy, are you there as well? Billy's listening. I don't think he's unmuted yet. But just in relation to today as well, Tom, I mean, can you, just because what I did today when I got the call today, we're broadcasting out over the internet now with them right now. We're not on like a terrestrial radio. People can't tune in. They have to be on the internet to hear what this is. They have to actually purposely come here. But there's lots of guys typing things there in the chat box now as we speak. I almost don't know where to begin with you to ask you a question, to be honest, because it's like an avalanche.
I was up to last Tuesday. I was out on bail and I was left on bail by Judge McKechnie, and it was a judge hearing it 2.5 years ago, and he was stopped from hearing it, and it came before Judge McKechnie, and he wouldn't hear it, and they kept me on bail and denied me freedom of speech for the last 2.5 years, and that was dealt with only last Tuesday week in the High Court, and I immediately went back on my property. And and as I say, I told you
do you live on the property, Tom? I mean, is that where you live?
Oh, this is the second property we have. We have two properties. I live on the property. They tried to say my brother owned 2 properties. My mother owned one of them 2 properties, and I live on, my mother gave that to me, and I live on that property. But due to me late brother's mental conditions and not being able to read or write, somebody had to take it into hand or to be lost in debt to the banks or other individuals. And what was being done to that property, I was to me, I was too soft, some of the things that happened. The week my brother died, and an individual took possession of a field on that property. And it was done by the same solicitor that done his will, and he worked for both parties, my brother and the fellow that bought it. He bought a 4-acre field for 6,000. But my brother didn't own the land, and he knew it, but he sold it in my brother's name, and my brother couldn't read or write, and that solicitor acted for both sides, buyer and seller, and he sold it for 6,000. That field, there was approximately 7, there could be definitely 6, and you could maybe get 8 building sites out of it, and you put them in at 20,000 a site, and they'd be cheap at that. The property was worth 130,000 or 120 to 130,000, and it was sold for 6,000. And isn't that taking some advantage out of a brother of mine? And he was certified around that time that he was able to manage his affairs.
Have you, okay, let's just get to what happened today, if you don't mind. Today, you were on the property, and can you talk me through what happened today in your own words, please, if you don't mind?
I was on the property, and I parked lengthways across the entrance to the gate on the inside. It's on the main road, and I was on the property where my car was private property. There were stickers up all around. The no trespass private property for private use. They were up all round, and members of the Gardaí eventually came, and they were trying to communicate with me, and I didn't want to communicate with them. I told them I was pointing to the side private property, and they eventually came. One individual came first, then 2 guards came, and I told them about private property, not interested. And 2 more came, and they had a paddy wagon as well in the finish. And I was told you're saying there was to get off property.
2 cars and like a van.
Yeah, I was told to get off. If I didn't get off the property, I'd be arrested. And after considering it, I drove straight into the property down further, and my car got stuck. And they came after me, And I stayed inside my car, and I ignored them because it was private property, and they broke the two windows of the car, on the front of the car, on the side, the big windows, the door, the driver's door window at the far side. Then they broke the other one, and these are our friendly Gardaí, and they were on private property, and they passed the signs
Tom,
on it.
Before they broke the windows, did they give you a warning, like to cover your eyes or anything like that?
They could have. But to me, they were on private property, and they shouldn't have done it. They have decided that there's an order keeping me off the land. I don't know where they got it or who gave it to them, but I have several orders. And the last order, the order they have was a Judge McKitney order that was got when I refused to contract with Judge McKitney. I told Judge McKitney he gave 12 months before he gave the order, and he wrote unapproved orders and this and that. And he was biased because he says they did not, and I have witnesses to this. He said that they did not commit fraud by withholding documents. They withheld documents, and the proof of it was before the court. And he knows that too, and I told it to him, and he asked me where was the fraud, and he says, they withheld the documents, and you had the proof in the court. And he let it go, but then he made an order that they'd served me with documents, and then he was going to grant them, this is a lockout position, he'd grant them to keep me off the property by doing what he done. And I told him I objected to it, that of him hearing anything else. So he done this and held, this is really taking my rights. He heard that, even though I didn't partake in it and I disagreed with him, I objected to him hearing it. And if judges can do that, they can do anything. And if that's the way our courts at the highest level now, that man has made a Supreme Court judge. And we also brought in a motion for a stay on that. And we went before a judge that had been a Supreme Court judge that McKitney wasn't hearing it, but we went before Judge Adrian Hardiman, who hasn't been fair to us on another occasion or two. And he heard it, and he wouldn't put a stay on the order. If he put a stay on the order, that would stop what Judge McKitney done till the case was heard. But he wouldn't. He prevented that happening by he not granting that stay.
And so today, Tom, I mean, okay, so you were inside the car.
When
they
we
broke
saw
the window.
all the hassle, we got inside the car protecting ourselves.
Can you tell me though, how were the windows broken? What were used to break the windows? Do you know?
I have a special little hammer, plastic type yoke for breaking windows. By the looks of things,
it turns them into sugar, that type of thing.
Before.
It turns them into like a sheet of sugar, and they just push through that yoke.
No, it's a sort of a hammer, and you give it it looks to be something like plastic, but I couldn't exactly explain it, but it's especially for the job itself.
Right, like a dead blow hammer or something like that.
Yes, and they eventually also when I came back after getting out in bail and coming back, I didn't know where my car was, and I was eventually informed that it was brought in off the property by a private firm, and that I can't get it. When I went, the guard sent me down first to get it, and then I had to go back. I couldn't get it, so I went back to the guards. Nobody told me. The guards wanted me to pay €120 to get my own car off my own property. I refused to pay it.
Oh dear. A question has just gone up in the chat box there, Tom, from Brian. How did they know he was there? Are these local Gardaí we're talking about here?
These are local Gardaí, but they're being reported. The Harrow thinks they own it, and they're trying to stay on the land, and and I reported to the Gardaí that I have no entitlements. They'll be left on it, and the two fields that were sold that I'm contesting, they think They didn't buy, them 2 fields were my property. They didn't buy them off of me. They bought them off me. My brother, who was a schizophrenic, who couldn't read or write, didn't know what he was doing. And that happened in 98 and 99.
Well, yeah, so and
you maintain... buyer and seller in both cases. And we told one of the individuals beforehand that I told him and my brother witnessed it. It wasn't for sale. And he went on and bought it off my brother, who was had a mental condition like that, and he wasn't capable of managing his affairs. And they're trying to prove now, to make all these deals stand up, they're trying to prove that he owned it, and that's what it's about, to protect solicitors. And none of them deals could go through, and I notified them solicitors in 95 that they couldn't do these things unless I agreed to them. And they gave me a word of mouth commitment, and they wrote to me about one, but they went and done these things behind me back, and that's it. And I challenged it when my brother was alive in the court. When they sold one field, they just went in and took it over, and I have my proper silage ready to be cut on it. And this lad went in and cut my silage and took over the field. And I couldn't say I owned it because they were holding the documents. But I never said, they tried to make out I was renting it. I never rented it, and there's documents in them solicitors' offices explaining that there was government grants being claimed on it, and we'd lose them if it didn't happen. But we never said we were paying rent or anything else. But they tried to push us up into saying things, which, and even the first solicitors we hired, I paid them money to stop the family from fighting, and that's what I was asked to pay into a fund that when it would be sorted, whoever it owned it would be sorted. And the solicitor I wouldn't pay the money, and then I got a guarantee that it would be held in joint accounts till it was sorted between the firms of solicitors. So I paid it in, and then when I paid it, the solicitor I had employed, he went to the barrister and told him I was a tenant because I paid that. And I didn't know what was happening. I never met the barrister. And that solicitor has been struck off, that I employed. He has been struck off for mismanagement of clients' funds to the tune of $500,000. So who do you believe? And he was from Nina, and the solicitor, our family solicitor, he came from Nina, and also the barrister in the court was from Nina. So I'm just giving you the picture of the facts of it. They all came from Nina. So you'll be talking about cozy cartels. I don't know what you call them.
Yeah, as I said, I mean, I don't even know where to begin, Tom. But I'll tell you what. Can we go back to today at the car again, if you don't mind? After the windows were broken, were you pulled from the car, or were you, how did you get out yourself?
They
what happened?
They opened the door and pulled me from the car. I half got out. Had no option in the matter. And I was handcuffed and brought up and put into a paddy wagon and brought into the guard station.
And what happened in there?
I signed nothing. I told them I was a sovereign human being, and that I had a contract with the sheriff, a Frederick Binchy.
Okay.
And to contact the sheriff. So
you instructed them to make contact?
Yeah, I said, get sorted out.
Okay.
And nothing happened, and that's the way it stands.
But then you ended up in Limerick. How did you end up in Limerick?
They eventually did have to sort of serve me with something or bring me to court next week or do something, so they decided to bring me before the court in Limerick. And I went down to the court in Limerick. I signed no documents. I did sign a document for me bail getting out, and I signed it sovereign. And I didn't sign any other documents, nor I didn't agree to anything they done. Every one of them. I told them I was protected by the sheriff.
Okay.
And I told the judge that too. I told him I'm a sovereign, and I'm not not Tom Kennedy, and I'm not acting for Tom Kennedy.
And
it's adjourned till next Friday in Thurles.
And did I hear mention earlier that the man you were in front of today, that he said he would look into this whole sovereignty thing?
Yeah, well, that's what I believe the man said now. So many things was happening, and I was so stressed. I can't. I have to wait. What's going to happen?
Well, that's the next thing I wanted to come to. I mean, if you don't mind, can you give people some kind of personal information about yourself, some private information, I should say, rather? I mean, you're not the youngest of men. I mean, you sound like you're in fine fettle, but you're not the youngest of men.
I'm a diabetic.
And you're a diabetic.
And I'm a pensioner.
Yeah. So.
And I didn't eat this morning at 9:30, and when I was in the guards barracks, I wasn't well treated, I can assure you. It took a big thing to get a mug of tea, and I eventually got 2 after, but all I got after that, I got one of these burger-type yolks with two sausages or something in it.
And did you explain to them that you were diabetic?
Yeah, and I told them that, I even told them that if they didn't look after me urgently, I'd more likely collapse on the floor. Because when you're a diabetic, and stress has a lot got to do with it,
yes.
You feel your bottom lip thickening. You know it's coming, getting serious then, and you tell them that, but they don't seem to understand it.
Did they get a doctor for you at all at any stage?
I asked them to get a doctor, and I quoted the doctor. The doctor wouldn't come because I wouldn't give him my date of birth, because I wasn't going to give anything to the Gardaí. And that's it.
So you're saying they refused you medical treatment, a doctor, because you wouldn't give them... Well, I mean, if you were out cold on the floor, if you pass out, they'd have to get a doctor then, surely. How are you supposed to give them a date of birth when you're out cold?
I explained to them that the way I was, it could happen, because I felt very low.
Well, sure, no doctor. I mean, I'd like to know what doctor they called, because as far as I know, a doctor can be struck off.
My family doctor, and my family doctor wouldn't come. They were so busy on it, they got me date of birth, and I didn't give it.
Well, that's a flippant disgrace. That's an absolute disgrace.
I was going to have them going through my private life, and they then rushed me to Limerick in the finish, and going before the court. That's it.
So hang on, wait a minute. So you're telling me today, did they actually tell you that they are not getting the doctor for you unless you gave your date a date of birth? Is that what they actually said?
No, they said the doctor will not come unless I give me date of birth.
And did you believe them?
I didn't. I couldn't. I wasn't in the conversation one way or the other. So
I know what you mean. Okay, sorry.
Whether it's right or wrong, that's what happened.
But either way, you asked for a doctor and none showed up today. Is that correct? Sorry, Tom, I'm not trying to stretch you out here. I'm just trying to ask you to be real clear here. So you asked for a doctor and a doctor did not show up. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Right. Okay. So, that's unbelievable. It's not unbelievable, unfortunately.
Well, as I say, if you're a diabetic, the one thing I'll tell you, when you're in a situation like this, what affects diabetes more than anything else is stress.
Well, I mean, duty of care.
With all these people, what you went through, I was severely stressed.
I mean, the Gardaí are used to handling people, even murderers and rapists and violent criminals, and even if those guys are injured and ask for a doctor, they get them a doctor.
Well,
and you a man who didn't hurt no. I mean, there's no criminal complaint against you for somebody saying that you hurt them in any way, shape, or form. Correct? You haven't injured a man.
I'm not a violent person at all.
Listen, Tom, somebody's just had to remind me there. Do you need to take a cup of tea or anything like that now? If you want to take a break for a few minutes, that's no problem. I have other lads here I can talk to in the meantime if you want to get yourself a wee cup of tea.
I'll get a cup of tea, but I'll leave the line open.
Just leave the line open, and if you want to come back any time at all, you just come back when you're ready, okay? Just tell us when you're back.
I'll be back in a few minutes, right?
Okay, so Billy is there.
Yeah.
Billy.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm absolutely shocked and stunned. I really am.
It's some story, isn't it?
No, I tell you, look, I mean, I've heard some stories in my time. People have told me some stuff, in confidence even, and I'm shocked. And I mean, I know from what Thomas said, there's so much more to this.
But it goes on, Vin. You could talk like that. That man has documentation that could keep this radio show open for the next 7 days, and can document and verify everything. Which, the mind boggles. Like, and you see there today, like if that man had to die in custody today or something, like who is responsible? When it's all said and done, like how can you treat somebody like that? And you even see. Why did it take 2 cars and a van to go out and bring in a pensioner? Or what's going on, or who is planning this?
Well, this is the thing, you see. I could understand a single unit with 2 Gardaí in it turning up or something like that. Absolutely. If they get a report like that. 2 of them, 2 carloads and a van in the middle of the countryside, that seems quite odd to me.
And he didn't actually tell you about the first approach they made for him. They walked into a field where his car is parked, and they looked for his driver's license. That's how.
In the middle of a field.
In the middle of a field.
Well, sure. Now you see, that's a bit strange because in the middle of a field, I mean, there's farmers up and down all over the country, folks, who have jeeps all over the middle of their fields. They use them on the land. They don't tax them. They don't insure them. They don't register them. They don't do anything with them. They just use them on the farm as a farm vehicle, and they don't get asked, do they have a driving license ever?
But can you even see like the mentality of it? Like, why would you ask anybody for a driver's license in the middle of a field? It's like walking out. It's like going out in a boat onto the middle of a lake and asking somebody for his driver's license.
Yeah, well, it reminds me of I hate to be, the joke, but it's like the joke you hear, a flying saucer lands in the middle of Kerry, and the guy comes in to tell the Gardaí, and he describes it to the Gardaí, and the Garda's response is, was it taxed?
But can I interrupt there for a sec?
You can, Tom, sorry, go ahead.
I was on the side, I was on private property, but I was near the road, and they looked for a driver's license on private property. I wouldn't say I was in the middle of a field, but I was near the road, but I was on my property at the same time, and they shouldn't look for a driver's license where they were. Nor couldn't summons me for tax or produce anything, because I was on my own property.
That's the point I was making. I mean, there's farmers up and down all over the land.
It wasn't in the middle of the field, just in case the Gardaí come on and say, I'm clarifying that I wasn't on the public road, I was on my private property.
Are you calling me a liar, Tom? Are you calling me a liar?
I'm not, but I'd be afraid
he's clarifying.
The Gardaí might identify it, and I'm only just trying to prevent anything wrong. I like to stress exactly where it happened, just that they wouldn't say we were trying to misrepresent anything.
No, that's a fair point. That's a fair point. Well, I mean, I think I think it's really important that your information gets out there. I mean, there's 50 people listening on the chat box now at the moment. I don't know how many other people are listening around the internet and around the world, but there's 50 guys on the Irish site there now, all typing away and talking to each other and in the chat box. And what I'd like to say, are you open to anybody coming on to asking you a question if they want to actually ask you something?
Yes, I'll answer any question anybody wants to ask.
Okay, so there's your chance, folks. The number to call in if you have a question for Tom is 00353 144 email is info@tnsradio.com, or you can add VincentTemp1 to your Skype. That's VINCENTTEMP and the digit 1, and there's no spaces in that at all. Listen, I just want to take a quick music break, folks, if that's okay. And we're back. You're tuned to tnsradio.com. The time is 22:21, 1st of the 4th, 2011 AD, so I'm told. And I assure you, this is no April Fool's joke. This is as serious as it gets. We're joined on the line with Billy. We also have Tom Kennedy, and I think Mally's in the background there as well. So, guys, sorry, Billy, as we're talking there just before the break. So, yeah, I mean, the situation as it stands now, Billy, I mean, or Tom, even, can you tell me what's next, or what's due, basically?
Well, I haven't. We'll have to do some work on it this coming week, but because I have to be back before this judge. I'm out in bail just till next Friday, and he'll be hearing this case, and I have to have something to protect myself or defend me property. I don't know. I haven't. As I say, by the time I was home this evening, I hadn't time to study it yet.
And so, what's due to happen to you next week? So you're out on bail, temporary bail at the moment. So what are they saying for next?
Pardon?
Sorry, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So next week, apparently, when you have to go back to this court, what are you actually charged with? I mean, have you been told what you've been charged with?
I have been told I was charged with criminal activities, which I denied.
But did they mention any particular criminal activity?
Not that I can. Not that I can remember. I was a bit dazed with all this, and I haven't a copy of what happened.
Okay, because I mean that's just really strange. Did they try to give you any paperwork to explain, or did they explain in the down? They gave me paperwork and told us, but I don't know where it is. Okay. Can you throw any more light on that as to what the charges
at
were?
At the time I was talking to Tom, it seemed to be that they were arresting him for not removing himself from that property for trespassing.
Yeah, it must be for trespassing.
And that's the criminal charge. So obviously it must be criminal trespass they're doing them on. That's from what we gathered at the time anyway.
It just seems so strange.
It's incredible, like that anyone can be, a criminal trespass charge for a man on his own land.
Well, I would have thought that was actually impossible, to be honest. I mean,
that's why I'm still trying to get my head around it. But
I mean,
it seems to be the case.
In theory, the law will not stand an impossibility. That's what we're told all the time. But
the amazing thing about this is there could be some other pensioner the other side of the same town of Thurles being mugged tomorrow, and there won't be two Garda cars and a paddy wagon there to pick up the guy who does the act.
Yeah, because they might be too busy putting another 70-year-old into handcuffs and chucking him into the back of the paddy wagon.
Yeah, because he obviously it's an easier job or whatever. I don't understand. I don't understand where the financial. Obviously there's issues there, I suppose, that they're trying to hide, but there's no financial. How do they justify the cost of all of these guys going out there today, or how much did that cost? This is a country that's practically broke, and we're paying all of these guys to come out and bring a pensioner somewhere when he already has free travel.
And did you have? Well, they gave him more free travel today, did you? But do you have any idea why you ended up in Limerick, Tom, as opposed to in Thurles?
Because the judge was sitting in Limerick today. There was no courts in Thurles, and you see, they had to bring me before a judge. They could have given me a charge and let me appear in the court next week, but I think they were playing a game. They could have charged me and had to appear next Monday or whenever the district court is on in Thurles. But they decided to send me to Limerick, and they were doing their best to have me imprisoned. And only that I had the bail money on me, I'd have been jailed.
Which, that was the 500 euro, was it?
As another tactic, get me to stop going on to my own property. And this is the name of the game in all this contempt of court. This is how this is the standard way of taking possession of somebody else's property.
But Tom, can I just ask you, Tom, did the Gardaí...
And then keep him off it for contempt of court. And if he goes back on it, or if he says he'll stay off it, he's conceding ownership. And
so it's catch-22, in other words.
They try, that's the tactic they try, to force people off their own property. Some of them for contempt of court. And then that's how they got me off it. And I had it for over 25 years in the first place. They said I was a tenant when beholding the documents, which was all pure and utter lies. And if the documents were before the court, none of them judgments, they couldn't have probate in the property, nor they couldn't have granted an order to keep me off it.
Can I just ask you, Tom, just roughly, approximately even, what size of a property are we talking about here? How many acres?
We're talking about approximately 80 acres.
80 acres, okay. And that little point I made earlier there, I mean, did the Gardaí show up as in were they passing by, do you think? Or did they come purposely to arrest you? Because if they came purposely to arrest you, surely they would have had an arrest warrant of some description.
I'm sure it was reported that I was on this property saying this. And one guard in plain clothes came out first and tried to contract with me, and I didn't. I was on private property and I ignored him. And the next thing, a squad car came with two people, and one individual left, and they were there, and I still ignored them because I believe I didn't have to talk to them, and that I was on my own property. They had no business being there. That there were signs of private property, and why should they take to me? Why were they doing this? They seem to have the order given by Judge McKechnie. Whoever makes it available, the solicitor. Solicitors are officers of the court, and they can ring the super and get them to do anything. That's their.
And would the property be considered a prime development location by any chance? I mean, I'm not trying to suggest that here, but I'm just wondering.
It's on the main Thurles Temple Moor Road, and it's good. It's between two fine towns. And it's only 4 miles from Thurles, and the same from Templemore around. And the main reasons. And
you've had quiet possession for this land for what, almost before all this started. You had quiet possession of the land.
My brother, the Lord have mercy on my brother, when he died in 2001, there was once they went to sell a field, and I objected to it. And I couldn't say I owned it, but I objected because they should have known I owned it with all the documents they had inside. But I hadn't the proof of payment, so I could never say, you can't say you own the thing if you haven't the proof of payment. So I never declared I owned it. But being in possession of it for so long, I wouldn't go off it. And I looked for my documents off of them back at that time in 1999. And I went to the man that bought it, and I told him it wasn't for sale. And I was doing that as owner, but I didn't say I was the owner. And my brother was with me, saying it. And they went into court trying to get me off it. And my brother, who was the schizophrenic, they didn't bring him into court to say he owned it. You think if he was selling it, and if they were trying to do it, they'd have bring them into court to say he owned it. But
so who did they think they were buying it off?
The courts would have to question why a man in such a condition that they couldn't understand could make such statements. And they kept them away from the court. If my brother was normal and he could talk, I'm sure he'd be brought into court saying he sold that. My brother wasn't capable of saying that. And they kept him out of court. And as well as that, when this happened in 1999, a solicitor in that firm's office, a junior solicitor, went around the street at Templemore. My brother gave 30 years walking around the streets, up and down and in and out, and he drove a car. And he was witnessed at that time in 1999 by a sister of mine who's dead to that person, being linked back to the solicitor's office with his arm around him, linking him back. And when 2 days later, his two sisters, myself and my brother, 2 sisters and 2 brothers, got a letter from that solicitor's office saying that my brother Bashy didn't want to have anything got to do with us and his property or anything else. My brother Bashy didn't know what was happening, and they got him to sign a document that they wrote up. And we reported that firm of solicitors to the Law Society, every one of us. And to treat a man in that health, that a family, number one, in the Constitution or anything else, it's all about the family. And this is what family do. You look after your own. And we done that. And that's what they wanted us to do that, and then they do what they like with our property. It was unacceptable. When you look at other families and see what they go through, and they have the different problems, and only because they're family do we do these things. And to have solicitors exploiting positions like that is frightening. I'm sure we'd have no problems or wouldn't worry about my brother if he was right. And they have tried this, and to me,
so you
have to highlight.
So you're saying, Tom, basically because
of elderly people who can't care for themselves, and there's loads of them out there, and there's several cases. I hope they ring in, and people don't know till they die, and then what's happening in these properties, and then they could be executors. If you're an executor of a will, you don't have to show to the next of kin anything in that will or any assets they have or anything else. And surely to God, blood relatives should have more of an entitlement to that, and that they can't get in outsiders as executor of wills, or to have outsiders burying people when there's blood relatives around.
Well, when the will is being read, everybody's entitled to be there, I think.
The first thing is, when a person dies, is finding out who is next to kin, or who's going to bury the person, or who decides it.
Exactly.
And if you're the executor of the will, you're supposed to do it.
That's right.
And in our case, I understood I was the executor by what the solicitor told me. And when I rang him the day my brother died, and he told me it was inside, and I understood it was the same will. And it turned out in court that the will that man had made, and he admitted he made it, couldn't be found. And it wouldn't matter with an ordinary person, but when somebody is a schizophrenic or has disables like that, they look at all the wills, the ones before it, to see were they enticed or cajoled in later years. All the wills should be kept.
Sure, haven't they just brought out a new thing for the protection of the elderly? They say over a certain age now, apparently there's this new thing that they brought out in there, in statutes or whatever you want to call it, the protection of the elderly, where once you're over a certain age, signing a legal document, you have to have a special consultation of some description, once you go over a certain age even.
Yeah, but the point is,
if you have a medical condition...
There was no medical examination given to my brother when he done the 1996 will.
Okay.
But he said, and this is, I quote my brother, and he told more than me, and he told several, that he changed his will in the year 2000, 10 weeks before he died. And still when his will came out, it was dated 1996. And we asked, because of what my brother said and what we were told, my brother signed something, and we asked to have the will carbon dated, which will give you an exact date of when that will was wrote on. And the solicitor and the executor of the will sent senior counsel to the High Court to stop us from getting that done. and yet they done an examination of his signature, which we didn't object to, and we never even mentioned it, and they spent €1,000 or pounds getting that certified. There was no dispute over his signature. The dispute over was when was the will dated. Was it dated in the year 2000 or the year 1996 as it's dated? And we were going on the evidence of what our brother told us, that he changed his will in the year 2000. And we were stopped. They hired senior counsel, and we were next to kin, and all members of my family that knew it wanted it done. And these outsiders prevented us from doing it. That asks a lot of questions about wills.
And can I put this one to you? This one
know about in wills, we didn't know, and this came from his High Court judge now. He was a barrister last year, and he was a constitutional lawyer, and the one question he asked, he couldn't make it out or understand it. What relation were the executors of the will to him? And there was no blood relation whatsoever, and all us family that were looking after him weren't in the will or mentioned in the will or weren't executors to the will, and that stinks to high heaven. Because we know every day of the week that brother of mine would drive into my yard and he'd walk into the kitchen and go to the cupboard and get a cup. So he was not, and we, all my family, the word of the day, whatever he wanted, he got. And to see it's not mentioned in the will or not executors or anything else, it's unacceptable. And when we went to get the test done, we were stopped. So if you'd have people like that doing your will, you'd want to be very careful. That's all I'm saying. That, especially when you look, we think we're well off, but when you look at what families go through, and there's always somebody in some family, and you see what parents and brothers and sisters have to do to look after their own, and to see them treated by solicitors like this, especially if they think that they can lay their hands on assets, or elderly people that if they can get inside the family, the way they can lose their assets.
Tom, there's loads of questions that have been going up on the screen here from the guys. Do you mind if I just want to read off 2 or 3 of them for you, and if you wouldn't mind, try to answer some of them.
Right.
One question is, where was there when you were in the Garda car on the way to Limerick today? I believe you were sitting in the Garda car with your hands handcuffed together, cuffed, tied, bound in front of you. And the question is, was there a seatbelt placed around you, or were you free to move around in the back of the car?
There was a seatbelt around me.
Okay, so that answers that one. Another one is, by any chance, is Tom's Land near to the planned casino complex in County Tipperary?
No.
No, okay. Another one there in relation to local radio newspapers. Have any of them shown any interest in your story?
No. I find when it comes to the press and the media, when I was in prison, they sent in a special officer to do this story. And when he wrote the story, even though I showed him proof and evidence of it, he went and either got onto the solicitor or this. And if you read what he wrote, you'd think I was a crook. And I have now, Tipperary FM have been fair and are a good radio station, and they're looking for it, and I couldn't give it up to now, but to me, they were the only station that did plug it, and we have to give them the height of praise. That's the local station. But as far as the papers and the press, if I did something wrong, I'd be on every paper in the country. But nobody prints anything. And the same thing inside in the courts, they wouldn't find the people that have these straightforward cases.
What about the likes of the Joe Duffy show, Tom? Have you tried the likes of that?
I haven't.
Okay.
And
Would you consider that maybe? Because I mean, I actually, I actually think they might actually take this on, because there's so many issues here, so many issues. I mean, not even what we normally talk about here in relation to sovereignty and law versus legalism, or one mirrored against the other, if you will, and what it is that Irish people want when living on the land. I mean, basically, most of us here just want to live in peace and be let be, go about our daily lives, not hurting anybody, causing no harm or loss or injury to anybody. And we want the peace officers, the Garda Síochána, to be just that. I mean, if I go into... Well, here's a point I want to make to you, Tom, and I think this is important, and I think everybody listening should get this into their head. If you go into a Garda station and make a complaint to say somebody hasn't paid you, that owes you money if you've done a job or something, they will tell you that's a civil matter, now get out. And yet, here today, they've come, apparently, to arrest you for a civil matter, using force. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Now, they're not supposed to do that, right? I mean, they can't have it both ways. Either they're not involved in civil, or they are. We need to know which is it. Well, I mean, I know it's supposed to be. They're supposed to be the guardians of the peace. That's what they're supposed to be.
Can I give you an answer to that?
Work away.
When my brother died, I was on that land for over 25 years, maybe a lot more, that's back over 10 years ago. And this first time they tried to take possession by force, the superintendent of the Garda station in Thurles came out, and I told him I was on the property for over 25 years, and he put the other side off, telling them not to come back if they have a case to go through the courts. A fortnight later, that super was transferred back to Cork, and there was an Inspector O'Neill who was acting super, and they went back on the land. And he allowed them to do criminal damage on the land. There was 4 squad cars in the field, and they were spraying the land with my cattle on the land. And they were spraying it, and I told them, the Gardaí on the site, that the super put them all off and told them what to do. And they done that, and I rang this so-called solicitor I had and reported to him on an hourly basis what was happening, and he done nothing, and we didn't know the law at the start, and all he had to do was say that they were trespassing. We didn't even know that. But they took possession, and my solicitor set me up. But the inspector there allowed that to happen. And that inspector took early retirement, and he went working in the solicitor's office in Templemore.
Well, can I ask a question? How did these Gardaí, if you didn't contract with them, Tom, how did these Gardaí come out, number one? How did they know that you were trespassing? How did they know that you were who you were?
It was reported, I'd say, by the Harrow Hills.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter who. What I'm trying to say is, how did the Gardaí, number one, know who you were? How did they know they were arresting the right man? And surely these guys must have required some sort of paperwork to arrest the man that they perceived that they arrested. So where did they get all of this information from? Surely they can't just walk
from the people that were trying to hold on to the property.
Yeah, but it's not. What I'm saying though is surely the way the system is like that.
Well,
they
did they
can't
take them
just
to
walk
court as witnesses, Billy?
What?
Did they take them to court to identify him or to witness against them or anything?
But no,
to testify?
no, there was no witnesses. But like, how did they know they had the actual man that they were supposed to get? When, like, how did the Gardaí actually know this? This is all what I would like to know. How did they know they brought the right man? Sure, how they could have went out there. If I was in the field, they could have brought me in. If that be the case, how would they know they had the right man? What paperwork had they? What were they there for? You know, that's the only thing I can't understand. Like, sure, like if they had to get him to Limerick, and it turns out that they had some retired Garda or something that was out on a fishing trip or something, was be walking across the field, how did they know who they picked up? That's what I'd like to know.
Very good question.
You know, like, there's not, that's the only thing that I find incredible, that these guys could go out, like, 2 cars and a van, a Jeep, or a van, or whatever it was, and all these things arrive out. They never once established who he was, because he didn't tell them. So like, how did they know who they actually took in there? And yet they were able to... Yeah, but you didn't tell them who you were, did you?
No.
So how did they know when they got to Limerick whose name to even put on some of this paperwork? And this bail bond, like, how do they actually know, or how can they document and verify, as we say, who the person on that document was?
I questioned in the court how they got the court order from Judge McKechnie.
Yeah, but it's just a simple point, though, Tom. Forget about, I know all of that side of it, but all I'm saying is that you had no driver's license on you today. So how did they establish that they actually had Tom Kennedy at all? Like, that's the one thing that I'm intrigued by, that these guys were able to produce all of this paperwork, the whole 9 yards, and they're able to get a bond of €500 on this individual who has never actually said he is that individual. Sure, like, is that lawful?
Well,
all I know is I paid the €500 and I signed it as sovereign, and that's it.
Yeah, but the only question, I know it's off topic, right? But is it lawful to go and take somebody from the side of the road or wherever and bring him into a Garda station, process him, bring him to a court, and put all this paperwork together? How did they get the jurisdiction to actually put Tom Kennedy or any name on those documents lawfully? Is that not a valid question?
Absolutely it is. I just want to make another comment here, just something from Mr. T in the chat box here. And Mr. T has just made a very interesting comment. You cannot fight them on the 7th floor. Look back or go back to the 1st floor. That's where you start your cases. And that's very important. So, but that's what you're basically saying here, Billy. Like, take them right back to the ground floor. How do they know supposedly, how do they know they had, in theory, Tom Kennedy? They'd no way of knowing. Is that your point, Billy?
Well, that's the exact point, sure. They had no way of establishing
They just had man.
But obviously, they were sent out to get a specific, person out of a field. But, like, how did they know they had the right person? They didn't, they've never gotten any information from the man that was arrested. And Yet they were able to process him and bring him before a judge as a specific individual who has never admitted to being that individual. Sure, I thought that would be unlawful.
Well, it would appear. I mean, I would definitely say that's as unlawful gets. I mean, no more than myself and yourself could just go up and pick somebody out of a crowd, Billy, and say him, and kidnap them or whatever.
Yeah.
Or make a complaint against them. You gotta have it backed by something, right?
Well, something of substance, I would have imagined. Sure, if that be the case, none of us are safe going anywhere. And we can be accused of being anybody. Sure, I could be picked up in the morning then, and they could take me down and try me as Colonel Gaddafi. Is that not the same thing?
Well, it's not too far off it. A couple of other comments in the chat box there I just want to get back to, guys, if that's okay with you. One was in relation to, where's it gone? Let me scroll back. Legal title to the land. Does Tom have legal title to the land? Well, that's the whole point. What about deeds, Tom? Actual title deeds or
it's in my late brother's name.
Right.
It wasn't transferred out of his name at the time of his death.
Right.
And we say what happened in most of our family properties, and in family properties, he usually didn't do a lot of these till they died, till the people died.
Yeah.
And it was still in my brother's name. And another point I'd like to make you, my brother's will didn't state what property he owned, even though he couldn't read or write. He owned a private house in the town of Templemore where he lived. And he had that property sold to me, and his will stated I leave all my property. And for a man to make a will, he's supposed to know what property he owns. He's not capable.
Well, you're supposed to be of sound mind as well. I mean, otherwise, automatically, I think if somebody of unsound mind as far as I know, whether they make a will or not, if their mind is found to be unsound, I think automatically all the property goes to the next of kin.
Well, in this case, all these unusual things that happen, that with somebody like that that's looking after him, to be completely ignored and not even mentioned in his will, and to have outsiders controlling the lot. And if you have outsiders that are executors of the will, they can't be questioned or asked about anything. So they're locked out to know what happened in that man's life. And nobody knows, only the family. And so, it's a complete cover-up of anything that happened.
And can I just clarify another what I think is a very important point here? Today, for example, when the 500 was handed over, would you agree or would you disagree that you handed over that €500 under duress, that you just wanted to get out of there, so you handed over under duress? Would you agree with that?
I would agree, because I was going to be locked up till next Friday, and I wasn't. I was stressed out of my mind the way the whole thing happened. I wasn't normal all day, and I have told the Gardaí in the station that I was capable of collapsing any minute, and I couldn't think straight to get home. And to me, I wasn't given anything. If you're a diabetic, it's very hard to explain it. You get sensations and your lips swell, and if that happens, you're liable to faint and collapse.
So you weren't just under.
I was that stressed.
So you were under medical what could be termed a medical duress, as well as just duress in its ordinary sense.
Diabetes, as I say, I collapsed in court before, and it was the first time it happened to me, and I could never explain it. And it very nearly happened to me a few times. And if I was going to court, I normally take a bar of chocolate, a 7-Up or a mineral of some kind, and I take tablets to try and keep me balanced. But this, I had nothing, and I couldn't think straight. I wasn't expecting this in the morning ship.
Well, that's a very good point. Another thing I'd like to ask you, which has been put in the chat box as well, that basically, you did have medical documentation of some description from the medical profession to say to describe rather your brother's medical condition. Yes, I mean that was all certified, if you will, and understood to be.
Under the freedom, I was nominated as my brother's guardian, and under the Freedom of Information, I have 30 years of his medical history.
Right. Okay.
It was given to me and nobody else.
Okay. And
our family, and if you suffered from schizophrenia 50 years ago, it was a thing people didn't talk about because you were mad and you were in mental hospitals. There was a stigma attached to it. And we never mentioned that to anyone to try and give him as normal a life as we could provide. There's more education today and people understand it more. But back the years, you couldn't let on, and everybody did meet him and know something was wrong. But nobody could sort of explain it or tell it, and it's people that were years around that were in the know, and everybody had a good, he wasn't offensive to people, and everybody had a good word to say it about him, but he wasn't capable of doing anything.
Okay. And can I just bring you to another area?
He walked around the streets, and that's all.
This is just in relation to another comment in the chat box here. On the 14th of March, you gave consent to the possession order, did you not?
On the 14th?
Of March, yeah. That's what's in the chat box there. I just...
that's how long ago? That's only... I gave consent to what?
To a possession order?
I didn't give any concession to any order as far as I know.
Okay. Okay, no, it's just that was it. It's in the chat box, so I fired him out. I'm just asking what comes.
I never agreed about possessions.
Okay.
to take me property, they try to invent this possession by getting us to say we'd stay off the land or that. And I told you about in 2003. In they sent out when Judge Buttermore let me out of prison.
Okay. No, I think I know where that's going. Okay. So in other words, you may not have fully understood what they meant at the time. So, I mean, I take it you didn't have any understanding of law versus legalism or any of that stuff back then. Would that be correct?
None whatsoever.
Right,
And
okay.
it was the one thing I knew. I wasn't a tenant, and I didn't lease it. I was, and never admitted to that. And they got possession by trying to say I had the land leased, and they came up with a notice to quit. And the day they got that injunction, it was in 2003. The day they got that injunction, I had a solicitor, and he went off record that day, and I asked Judge Oliver Buttermore so that I'd have representation. I had it up to that she'd hear the other case first, so that solicitor would represent me. And Judge Buttermore let him off record, and I had nobody to hear the following case coming up. So I had nobody to represent me, and they looked for the injunction to keep me off of it. And I didn't even know what it meant. But what I did say to the judge that day, you're not going to let him plough me land again. It cost so much money to reseed it the last time they done it. And she got an undertaking from the barrister that they would never plough it. And when they ploughed that land, her injunction by right in law went. And there was a motion for her to strike out her injunction. The day we were jailed, and she wouldn't hear it. She heard the committal case first, that she wouldn't hear the injunction, which denied us that the injunction should have been struck out that day.
Right, okay. Again, look, I'd be a bit more aware of what's happening in and around you than it seems than you are, and a lot of the guys here on the chat box would be as well. So we do have a slight advantage of you, and that's over you in that sense that we've actually been studying how these guys go about doing what they do. You see, and a lot of the guys in the chat box are saying things or making comments, but. I'm not putting some of them to you because it might sound as if they're not on your side. They are. The guys are behind you. It's just that they would have probably a different level of understanding and comprehension about what these men in the robes do. And but I don't think anybody would come against you in the sense that almost nobody, guys. I just got to remind this is to the listeners now, Tom. A lot of the guys in the chat box there. I got to remind you guys. Going back 10 years ago, how many of you knew anything about any of this stuff other than the obvious contenders there, Mr. T and a few others? I mean, going back 10 years ago, 5 years ago, last year, even some guys had no idea about any of this stuff. There's other guys out there who've been studying for 30, 40 years. I've been looking at this stuff for 16, 17 years. And I mean, I didn't want to interrupt you too much tonight, Tom. Maybe perhaps you might come back on again sometime. I'd love to have you back on again. You're more than welcome anytime. I feel for you. My heart breaks for you, considering all the things you've been through. And I do think there is remedy there for you somewhere. I think remedy can be found. But part of that remedy, I think, is a realization that when you go to the legal profession, when you grant unto them license to act for you, you're doing something, and most people don't realize that you're making yourself redundant. Now, I know they won't tell you that that's how it works, but it's only as you look down through how they use their words of art, their wily ways, and you realize it's kind of like it's not like a deception as such. It's not a straight up deception, even though it is deceptive.
Well, I'll say one thing. Judge McKetney offered me free legal aid, and I didn't want to take it, but I'd be accused of being
you see, this is the point I'm making. If you take it, you see, that's what you make yourself redundant by taking it.
And I took the free legal aid, and I gave one instruction that they plead fraud, and they were writing it up and doing what they liked, and they wouldn't plead fraud, and I sacked them. And the next group done the same thing. And one of the senior counsels, he told me that, and
you see that's the point I'm making, Tom. You see, people think when they hire a solicitor that suddenly they get to tell the solicitor what to do. That's not how it works. When you hire a solicitor, you think, okay, you go in there and tell them this, tell them that, and tell them the other. The court case happens, the solicitor stands up, he says something completely different. You're sitting there with your jaw on the floor, not wondering what the hell just happened, and the whole court case is over. And guess what? You lost. Here's your bill. Good day. And people don't understand that. Well, they don't know what the heck happened.
The second lot of legal advisors, and we defended ourselves.
You see, this is it. Whereas you see, they will tell you, oh, let me do that case. I win so many cases, blah, blah, blah. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Who knows? I mean, I've never seen anybody say, well, to a solicitor, well, show me your track record for a start, which perhaps people, and who, even if they are going to engage a solicitor, and I personally, I wouldn't. I like my hands to be kept cleaner than that.
Well, the only advice I give to anyone that's engaged in solicitors or even get the advice off them, they should never go on their own. They should have 3 or 4, listen to solicitors and barristers and record what they're saying or tape it or something. Because this man is a High Court judge now, and what he told me was, you have to plead, admit being wrong and do a deal. That's what he said. And he's a High Court judge now.
You see, that's how they earn their crust of bread, you see. And
yeah, well, that's what he told me.
We basically have taken the lid off this whole process that these guys have been keeping secret for literally probably for thousands of years. Not just us. I mean, there's loads of other people on the internet across the world now who have really, really good working knowledge of what these guys were up to. We've discovered some of their sneaky, wily little ways. As I said, they're not exactly committing fraud. You wouldn't exactly call it fraud, but it sure as shit feels like fraud when you're in the middle of it. And that's, I perfectly get that people think it's fraud. I mean, we had Darrell O'D and Gareth on the radio here last night basically saying bankers, fraud, yada, yada, yada. And I keep saying to people, listen, I know it looks like it, I know it feels like it, but it's not. They're not actually committing fraud. They won't actually commit fraud. And believe it or not, you might not realize it, but judges, generally those guys are, to the best of my knowledge, are impartial. It's just because we don't understand and comprehend the language they're using, we don't realize it. And we end up saying things that we don't know what they mean. Instead of, in other words, had you said to those guys, and half of the times when you were in court, I can't, and when they ask a question to you, if you would have said to them, well, let's face it, you're in a court, and if they ask you a question, it's a legal question. You're not legally trained, so would you not say, perhaps, well, I can't make a legal determination on the question you've asked me. Now they will say, oh, go get a solicitor. Are you instructing me to get a solicitor? They might say, yes. Well, I can't make a legal determination on that either.
That's what the judge told me today, to get a solicitor.
Right, and you see again, I mean, you aren't legally qualified to make a decision on that, right?
Yeah.
Listen, we're at 11:10. I don't know if you want to take another quick break, or do you want to hang on for a bit, or
I'll hang on.
You'll hang on, that's okay. Well, folks, I'm just going to take a quick break, and we're back live. You're tuned to tnsradio.ning.com. The time is 23:10, 1st of the 4th, 2011 AD, apparently. And anyway, Billy and Tom are still with us here. Indeed, Mally is hanging in the background there. I don't know if Mally wants to come in and make any comment on anything that he's heard so far tonight. I did actually ask Mally to host tonight's show because Bryzer and Chris apparently were, Bryzer was unwell and not able to make it tonight. So I hope you get well soon, Brian. and I hope Chris can make it with you next Friday. So I don't know if Mally wants to come in with anything there. Have you any comments you'd like to make, Mally, on this? Sorry, Mally, can't hear you, mate. Are you on mute or something?
I'm not on mute.
Very, very hard to hear you, Mally. I think you're, yeah, okay, well, no, you're not coming through. You're not coming through at all. I don't know why. Billy, can you talk so I can check you're still there, yeah?
Yeah, no
okay,
problem.
So no, it's not the line, so it must be something Mally's end. Billy, I mean, I think we should probably kind of wrap this up a bit. To be honest, I want to get this up onto broadcast onto the website and get the YouTube upload done, folks. TNS Radio Ireland is the YouTube channel, so it's YouTube/user TNS Radio Ireland. That's where you'll find old podcasts and whatnot. Also on tnsradio.com for podcasts as well. And you'll get the podcast from the other guys during the week there also. Don't forget Scottish Sovereigns on the Land, Northeast Truth, loads of other sites there, folks, to spread the word in. Billy and Tom, I mean, to finish up over the next few minutes or so, is there anything else you particularly think we need to get to, Billy?
No, I think we just have it covered. But Tom, that was the other question. Were all these Gardaí that were out there today, were they all local Gardaí from Thurles, do you know, or where were they from? Or
all Thurles. They were from Thurles.
So these are all local men out terrorising.
To be coming and going in Thurles, Garda station. You wouldn't know who you'd be meeting.
Yeah. So it's incredible that it's such a local thing that these guys get so involved.
Well, I wouldn't know any of them, and I'm a local.
Well, you'd have to wonder, Billy, where are the Garda Síochána who stand and look at their super or whoever and say, I can't do that, that's unlawful?
Well, that's what you'd imagine, because surely these guys have to know, because they were obviously sent out.
Well, I mean, they're not a million miles away from Templemore. Maybe they need to go back and get retrained.
Well, you'd imagine, you'd imagine so, but how or what was told what was said to these guys before they were sent out, because they never established as to who he was or anything, and they went out there on a specific mission.
And
that's not the way
order.
Yeah, but you see, it doesn't matter if they had 50 orders they didn't establish, who they picked up. That's what part I can't understand, how they established that you were, obviously I suppose you were the eldest gent out there and they knew they were going out for a pensioner, but that's the only clue that they had. But if there was two pensioners there, which one of you would they have brought in?
The one that didn't look like an ex-judge.
Yeah, but that's the bit that I just would find most worrying, that they were able to bring somebody in without knowing who he was. It's just it's scary stuff. When you see that something like that can be done, and bring him in, process him, bring him on, and whatever, refuse him medical care. I just don't understand where these guys are being trained. You see, are they being trained in Templemore at all, or is it out in some...
I don't know if it's a question, but what Carl just put in the chat box there, and I have to say, fair play to you, Carl. He always sees things in a very clear fashion. Carl is saying, never mind the legal defence Tom is going to have to put forward. The question of impropriety should be enough. And you know something, I have to say, the impropriety that appears to have been displayed by everybody involved in the so-called legal profession, lawful business, whatever you want to call it, it's stunning. Now, I mean, there was a time I looked back over. There used to be a website. I don't know if it's still out there. I think it was called crookedlawyers.com or something like this. Have you had any involvement with any of those guys, Tom, or have you come across any of those chaps? Because some of the stories on there, they read like fiction. They're so amazing. They read like fiction.
My case was on it years ago, and one of the men that put it on it, Judge McKechnie, to force him to take it off it, because nobody was allowed. There was a gagging order on me, as I say, for 2.5 to 3 years, and it has only been lifted last week. and the men that push it on the internet.
Well, again, I mean, where did these people think they can get a man to stop talking? I mean, either we live in a free country or we don't. Which is it, Tom? Which do you think?
Well, a High Court judge and this senior counsel that is now another High Court judge, they says my freedom of speech couldn't be taken, and still the judge last week has put clauses into my freedom of speech that you'd wonder whether you could use it or not. So have your freedom of speech or not, and that's what I said to the judge, that you can say anything as long as you're telling the truth.
Well, I have to say, I mean, listening to you talk tonight, I don't think anybody listening would doubt one word you've said at all since this started tonight in around 9 o'clock. I don't think anybody would doubt one word. I mean, because when you're telling the truth,
anybody
Tom, it flows.
That will be coming on, or if they're going into court, if they don't tell the truth, it be cut out in 10 minutes.
Exactly.
So don't tell lies. That's what I'd be saying to everyone that will be listening.
Yeah.
You're at nothing. You're caught nobody on yourself telling lies. And one judge says to me, they serve documents on my car, and I inside my car and I locked in. And this man that's involved in it,
well, you see, they're
swore.
Well, I'll tell you what, Tom. I'll tell you something else that was said to me earlier. That the situation you're in, there's another way of viewing the whole situation. That it's not necessarily a legal matter. It's not necessarily a constitutional matter. More so, you've signed there today. You told them you were sovereign, and you signed sovereign. So it's a sovereignty matter, and there's no judges apparently in any of the courts that have the authority to hear a sovereignty issue, except for the sovereign court under Óglaigh na hÉireann in Collins Barracks, or in McKee Barracks, in Dublin. And apparently there's been a new guy appointed there, a new judge under the sovereign, for the sovereign citizens. So, again, maybe some investigation needs to be found out about that. But that was according to Billy Maguire, that this does exist, and it's always been there, apparently. It's just nobody knew much about it. Billy Maguire has mentioned this on interviews with me quite some time ago, and not too long ago. So, a sovereignty issue can't be heard by the constitutional, or by the Supreme Court even, as far as I know, because the idea is that they're only the 26 counties. They're not the entire island of Éire, if you will. And your question, because this relates to land, it's a sovereignty issue. It's nothing for them to be getting involved in. They don't have the authority to get involved in it, apparently. Now, again, maybe you want to make more inquiries about that another time. But I just thought I'd mention that. Also, Phoenix there's a guy called himself Phoenix on the chat box there. Good guy, I know the guy, and he's been making some comments there as well. He's basically saying, listen, folks, a done deal with a man who is of unsound mind is void. End of story. Yep, absolutely. Nobody would deny that. And unless the legal guardian agrees, it's void. Yep, absolutely, Phoenix. And there's another one here in relation to where has it gone? Sorry, guys. There's so many comments going up through the comment box there. This one from Alan. It is necessary to prove that the purpose of the conspirators was to cause the victim economic loss per Lord Diplock in Scott for the test of dishonesty. See or v. Gosh, 1982. And there's some listings there and a Wikipedia. The crime of conspiracy. So, because, Tom, would you say that you appear to be, that you think it's possible that you are a victim of an actual conspiracy that's taken place over many years?
I believe that
you think that's a possibility, is what I'm saying?
That this was designed to protect the firm of solicitors who've done some of the deals, and if by I proving myself to be the owner of the property, the deals will fall. So that I couldn't be so that there's a vested interest by the solicitors to prevent me from becoming owner. I'm sure they didn't give two hoots what member of the family became owner, only that they, if my brother was still the owner of it, all the transactions he done would be legal. But when I'm the owner of it, the transactions they done are not legal, and that's the problem. And they're protecting.
So they become void. They call that void ab initio. In other words, void from the very beginning. In other words, it doesn't exist
and that's
anymore.
Why the simple answer to this, and it also proves that it would be a basic right to be able to get your brother's will for the family to get the truth out. There'd be no objections to having the test done on it, and we can't know who objected to prevent the test and went to the trouble of hiring senior counsel to stop the test. That's frightening.
Well, listen, we're nearly at 11:30, and I want to finish up at 11:30 if that's okay with you guys.
Oh, okay.
Really, is there anything else you want to throw in there at all? Yeah.
No, we're just going to. I think we have everything covered anyway. Sure, we can let Tom go.
Yeah. Well, this is it. I mean, sleep easy tonight, Tom. Don't be
very much, and I thank everyone. And if anybody has questions or anything, if you contact me, I'll answer them, because I have. It's no good by saying things if I haven't the facts. I have them.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, I do have a contact number for you now. So, will you allow me to pass that to anybody that wants to get in contact with you?
Right, you can.
Okay, so there you go, folks. There's a contact number available for Tom if you want to get in touch with me here on tnsradio.com. And don't forget, I did make the offer if anybody wanted to call in with a question or ask you something. And obviously, I don't know whether the guys were so busy typing away because the chat box has been flying. Maybe they forgot. You have 5 minutes left, lads, if you want to get a quick question in. 5 minutes if you want to call in. The number 00353 144 3309. Or you can get me on Skype. So, what I'd say to you, Tom, is, look, you've had a hard day. Get yourself a good night's sleep, and don't worry about it tonight. And every day is a new day. Do what you got to do. But there are people out there. What I really want you to know is there are people out there that actually care. We care. The guys on the chat box here, we care. I think what was wrong with on Irish soil for a long time, the Celtic Tiger came along, I suppose, and a lot of people stopped caring about each other. And I think it might sound like a simple thing, it might even sound like a bit of a naive thing to say, but it's true. We do actually care, and we have to care, because if we don't care for each other, folks, sure, what's the point? If we don't care for each other, we all may as well go to war against each other, and sure, nobody's going to win that war. So really, we've no choice but to care properly for each other, the way we're supposed to be.
Yeah, but sure, how can any of us define ourselves as being sovereign, Vin, if we're not interested in what's happening to men like Tom?
Absolutely. I mean, we got to care. There's no two ways about it. Because, look, I want to protect my children and their future. So to do that, I have to make sure that the other, when they grow up to be adults, that the other adults that they meet, I want them to be sovereign in their behavior as well. I want them to understand and know how the whole thing works and how to live a good, healthy, decent life. Isn't that not what we want for our children, folks? I mean, who doesn't want that for their children? But I sure as shit don't want what's happening, and I don't want it to get any worse. It's already gone way too far, in my opinion. Way too far.
Yeah, well, that's about the size of it, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's back to the family, and that all kids look after one another and pull them up by the bootstraps.
Exactly. Well, I mean, all there is family, folks. That's all we actually have is our family. That's all there is.
That's it.
One big family. That's what we are. We live on an island. It's not, unless you can swim very good. You're staying here. Boats and planes aside, I suppose. But you know, even people who leave, they all yearn to come back, right? So,
This is home.
home is home. The home sod is the home sod. And I mean, there's fellas out there who would literally scrape the home sod clear of soil from one end to the other and leave it a bare, barren rock if they thought they'd get away with it. And they'll do it, folks. They'll do it too if we let them. They're taking the forests, they've taken the minerals, they've taken the oil, and now they're after the bogs. They're trying to take the bogs. They've told the turf cutters, 6,000 turf cutters apparently are told that they can no longer cut turf on their own bogs where they've been cutting turf for probably hundreds and thousands of years at this stage. So
it's actually funny in some ways, isn't it?
You know what? If it wasn't true, it would be funny.
Mm.
So, well, listen, I'll wrap it up there for tonight, folks, if that's okay.
Okay.
Oh, one last question, Tom. It's from Man A here. Just wondering, have you yourself, by any chance, made a will?
No
I don't know if that's a touchy subject tonight, is it?
No way. I hope to have everything disposed of before I die, or have it done in such a way that to keep these people outside the gate, and that my wife is alive, and that we'll work it out between us and look after our family to the best of our ability. But with what I have seen, most of the cases where all this injustice is on two things: wills and property.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, listen, there's been some fantastic comments on the chat box tonight, guys. Sorry I didn't get to half of them, but the chat box tonight has really shown me that you guys are really, really getting this into your head. And one last little one was, what were they spraying your land with?
They were spraying my land with Roundup to kill the grass so that the cattle couldn't eat.
Oh, shit. Okay, right.
Or it could be Gramoxone now. It was either one of the two, but they were killing the grass.
Okay. Listen, I'm going to call it a night at that, folks, if that's okay with you. And as I say, Tom, anytime, you now have the number for here as well, so anytime if anything happens and if you feel you want to give us a shout,
I'll do that.
Just call me, let me know what's going on, or indeed during the week, one of the other guys could be on air. It doesn't matter, any of them, I'm sure it'd be delighted to have you on any time at all. Okay, Billy, anything else before you go?
No, we'll sign off with that. Well covered.
I think so. I think that was pretty much.
And thanks for doing such a good job.
You're more than welcome. You're more than welcome. Well, that's why we get paid the big dollars here, you know. Oh no, wait, we don't.
Make the best of it.
We don't get anything from anybody, but that's okay. Okay, I'm going to finish off with this one, folks. This is August call us off. You've been tuned to TNS Radio. Folks, I'm just going to interrupt the stream there for a second while everybody's still tuned in. Something I just came across, and this is a book. I put photographs of this on my page. If you look at my page on tnsradio.ning.com, there's 2 new photographs been added there from a book entitled Outlines of Constitutional Law. It's by Chalmers and Asquith. Sweet and Maxwell Limited were the printers, and it printed in 1921, I think, or 22, right? A lot of very interesting books appeared on the shelves around that time, folks, for obvious reasons, if you know what I mean. This is page 199 and half of page 200. I'm going to read it because I think it's vital that you know this stuff. This is entitled The Sheriff. The sheriff, in brackets, Vice Comes, or VICE hyphen COMES, close brackets, was formerly the deputy of the Earl or Ealdorman of the Shire, and when the Bishop and Earl gradually desisted from judicial work at the county court, the sheriff took upon himself their functions. When in the reign of Henry II, the King's justice began to override local justice, it frequently fell to the lot of the sheriff to execute the King's writs. To this circumstance can be attributed the present function of the sheriff in executing writs of feri facias, elegit, and capias, etc., or FIFA they call that one, I think. There are 2 kinds of sheriffs, viz., sheriffs of counties and sheriffs of certain ancient cities and boroughs, chosen by those towns, and there's brackets, As to these localities, see Odgers on Local Government, 1st edition, page 95 and 96, close brackets. Next paragraph. The county sheriff is elected in the following manner. The Chancellor of the Exchequer and certain judges of the High Court meet at the Royal Palace of Justice, the Strand, Middlesex, on November 12th in each year, and choose 3 men of sufficient means from each county. The sovereign pricks, that's with an R, pricks the name of one of these 3 men, who is then duly constituted sheriff of the county for the year. The sheriff is bound to serve without salary, but he is consoled by the fact that he takes precedence over the entire county, the Lord Lieutenant excepted. That doesn't mean the Lord Lieutenant is above the sheriff, by the way, folks. That just means that the sheriff isn't above him. If he refuses his services, he can be fined. I'm going to read that again. If he refuses his services, he can be fined. That's male or female, folks, the way they write these books. His duties are to execute high court writs, summon juries, supervise executions of persons sentenced to death, that's persons sentenced to death, and perform the duty of returning officer at a parliamentary election. Since the passing of the Prisons Act, 1877, the sheriff has no longer control over prisoners in his county. He has to wait upon the judges at the assizes and to pay liberally for their entertainment. Though almost all the duties of the sheriff are undertaken by his deputy, the under-sheriff, the former, that means the sheriff, is responsible for the acts of the under-sheriff and all persons engaged under him. So, for example, think to yourself, the locksmiths, etc., who break into your property to assist the seizure of property and whatnot. Sheriff's responsible for all that, folks. Says here, e.g., bailiffs who execute writs of execution, where the sheriff's underlings commit tortious acts in the course of their employment. The sheriff is responsible, e.g., trespassing in a man's house. It doesn't say persons, It says trespassing in a man's house. When judgment has been entered in the High Court for an unliquidated amount, interlocutory judgment in brackets, it often falls to the lot of the sheriff to assess the damages. On these occasions, the under-sheriff sits in the court as judge and hears both sides on the question of damages and all matters relevant thereto. Did you hear that, folks? He sits as judge. Okay, so in other words, sometimes you got to check whether that's a judge and whether that man is a judge in front of him. He might be an under-sheriff, which is very important to know. A jury of 12 men then fix the damages. He has similar function in compensation claims where land is compulsorily taken. End of chapter. Now there's some big, fat, juicy stuff in there, folks. Believe me. Big, fat, juicy stuff.